Hey everyone, Games Apprentice back with another video, and this week I'm going to be looking at the Commodore 64 Collection 2. Does this one redeem the Commodore 64, or is that just an impossible mission? Let's find out. Now, if for some crazy reason you haven't seen my first video on the Commodore 64, and you want to see what I thought of that one, or some background on the Commodore 64, well, you can check that out here. If you have, then you'll know personally that I wasn't a big fan, and that I'm not going to telegraph my punches on this. There are 14 on this one. Here they are ranked from worst to best. Barely crossing the finish line is Pit Stop 2. A racing game whose main selling point seems to be that when you get low on fuel or your tyres get too worn down, you can have a pit stop. The game is split into two screens, which was probably great if you had a friend, but annoying and, I imagine, incredibly lonely if you didn't. The gameplay isn't particularly fun. You've got weird over-the-top G-force that push you into the sides on the corners, and nothing much to look at. The most annoying part of the game though has to be the sound effects. Having to listen to two cars making weird acceleration noises is just too much, and having to do a single race with the sound on for the duration feels like a painful endurance test. This might be the worst racing game on the Evercade, although it's probably this. The street sports are back and fresh from an outing of baseball. Your local bunch of hipsters are ready for some basketball. As with the previous street sport games, the highlight is picking your team based on how cool they look, in hopes you'll be good friends, or maybe more than good friends. Then, just like in real street sports, your ragtag bunch of layabouts go and get changed into matching colour-coordinated outfits and go play a 3-on-3 game of basketball. The gameplay itself is pretty much just like NBA Jam, except you've got one button for shoot, pass, tackle and block, everyone moves like they're on Baywatch, you're playing complete and utter silence, and oh yeah, it's shit. This isn't the worst shooter I've played, that's really the only compliment I can give it though. Slayer is a fairly dull, uninspired space shooter, of which there are already plenty of on the Evercade, and they're pretty much all better than this one. It doesn't look great, and the collision detection seems a bit off. Again, it's another game where it's really ruined by sound effects and no music. This happens a lot on Commodore 64 games, so I assume it's a limitation of the Commodore 64, but honestly, the sound effects for this one are just grating. Getting power-ups actually feels like a punishment, as it means you've got an extra sound effect that you've got to hear. If you do like the look of this one, maybe just play it on mute while listening to your favourite Games Apprentice YouTube channel. The first game on this list which I didn't hate is Firelord, which, being that we're only at number 11, means that things are already looking promising. Firelord is a weird game. You basically start off as some lowly peasant trying to make his way in the world, constantly being attacked by blokes with weapons. You walk around picking up items, learning spells, and bartering. You need to barter to get the items you require, however initially you've nothing to barter with, so you have to try and get a 5-finger discount. If you get caught, however, which you always do, then you have to stand trial in a timing game where you'll either get away with it or get murdered. As you progress, you'll eventually be able to shoot fireballs or something at enemies, although the enemies just seem to endlessly reappear, making it mostly pointless. The instruction manual is pretty helpful for this one, which is good as the game itself tells you nothing. It's always disappointing when a game starts with some okay music and then just descends into silence. And Firelord is yet another one that does that, opting for the sound effects of footsteps instead. This one is a pretty basic platform shooter in which you've got 15 minutes to escape to your rescue ship before a bomb goes off. You can switch between your various weapons whilst running and jumping. Again, there's no music, but it sort of works here, with just the sound effects give it an isolated in space kind of vibe. For the most part, enemies are designed the same colour as the background, which isn't great, as the game seems to use most of its different colours on the overly large hub at the bottom of the screen. The game's okay, it's quite fast and has a variety of enemies, but you're probably not going to spend too long with it. I originally had this game back on the Sega Master System and I remember enjoying it, but I was just a little kid who didn't know any better. It's pretty unique in terms of events, consisting of 8 different games. Bull riding probably being the highlight and sumo wrestling probably being the low light, but honestly, they're all pretty consistent along the board. They're okay. The controls seem to be either rhythm based, of pressing left and right for speed, or just about remembering the controls in the first place and getting the timing right. It looks pretty good compared to some of the games on here and certainly offers variety. On-screen instructions before each event really should be included though, as having to consult the instructions every time is a bit of a pain. It's mildly enjoyable. Mildly enjoyable. The sequel to World Games, California Games is easily the most recognisable game on this list, being ported to multiple other consoles and already on the Evercade on the Atari Lynx collection. This version is certainly better than the Atari Lynx version, with an additional 2 events, the flying disc and roller skating. Surfing is probably the best game in the collection, where you need to ride a wave and do stunts without wiping out. The events on this one certainly feel more skill-based than the one on World Games, making for more an entertaining package. It's probably a little bit more fun than World Games, and it's a big improvement over the Atari Lynx version in every way. In this one you control what I assume is a flying naked mother who's trying to save her babies from insects in space by shooting lasers out of her eyes. The gameplay is clearly a Defender clone in which you can fly left and right and have to shoot the insects before they can kidnap your kids, and then catch the kids as they hurl into the ground to certain doom. Modern gamers might also recognise this form from the excellent Resogun on the PlayStation 4 and the Vita. It's certainly no Resogun, but it's a fun little game that's worth playing if you're a fan of the genre, and worth trying if you've never tried it. Uridium is a side-scrolling shooter in which you can change direction as you clear enemies around what I want to say is a space station, before having to land your ship. It's clearly technically very impressive, it's very fast and being able to quickly change direction is cool, as are the ship animations and shadow that for some reason only your ship has. There are plenty of obstacles to avoid and lots of things to kill you. It feels like a unique game that I can imagine those who own this one really liked. I think the difficulty is the only reason it's not higher on the list. You can fly at speed, but you really need to memorise the levels or get very lucky to avoid obstacles. I didn't expect to like this one at all. Maze games just aren't my genre in the slightest, but to my surprise, this one was actually alright. You need to navigate various maze-like areas, picking up scrolls to open the exit, but needing to pick up the scrolls in the right order, which you've no way of knowing other than trial and error. The areas are full of teleports, making getting lost extremely likely, as well as enemies and power-ups. You're able to shoot enemies, and as you get more power-ups, you begin shooting more in multiple directions. It feels a fairly unique game. The main reason this one isn't higher up on the list is because it's not massively different from the first game, which was on the first collection. It's just got a little bit of an upgrade. The core gameplay is the same as before. You need to explore a large area, solving puzzles and doing flips along the way. It's arguably a better game than the original, so if you don't have that one, this is definitely worth checking out. If you didn't like the first one though, you're probably not going to like this one either, and even if you did, you might not necessarily want to play more of it. You should probably know by now if this game is going to be worth your time. If the first collection didn't exist, this might be a bit closer to the top spot. I can imagine sort of Fargo being amazing back in the 80s. It's an exploratory RPG that feels inspired by board games with its somewhat turn-based nature. You move around the level picking up loot and trying to find stairs to different floors. If there are enemies in the vicinity, they'll get to move after you finish your completed step count, making it somewhat turn-based. You gain XP, leveling up, making you stronger. Fights basically just consist of walking into enemies on screen, with various pickups and items to help you along the way. The main thing that lets this game down though, besides its incredibly basic visuals, are the load times between levels. Even still, it's a moderately fun game that does have an adventure vibe. Cybernard is probably the game on this collection that I spent the most time with. It presents you with a lot of buttons compared to most games on these collections, to be able to switch to specific weapons rather than cycling through them, so it took some practice to get used to it. Each screen is almost like a puzzle. You've got a range of weapons to choose from, and you need to decide which one's going to be the best to get through that screen. Whether it's needing bombs to take out large enemies, or requiring your shield to get you through a difficult manoeuvre. It's a fairly tough game, but fun once you get the hang of it, but you'll enjoy every minute of it due to its awesome soundtrack. It's probably the best soundtrack on the Evercade, although I'm open to counter suggestions in the comments. Just edging the top spot is my favourite game on this collection, Nebulous. It's a puzzle platformer in which you need to try and work your way up a 3-dimensional tower in 2D. The tower's littered with enemies, and if they hit you, you fall down a level, requiring you to either shoot them or outmaneuver them. Visually, Nebulous looks awesome, instantly invoking Fez vibes. The sound effects feel very arcadey and are much less irritating than I've come to expect from other Commodore 64 games. It's a challenging little platformer that anyone with this collection should definitely try out. Now, if you follow my channel, you'll know that I strongly disliked the first Commodore 64 collection, so to be honest, I really wasn't looking forward to playing this one. I'm pleased to say though that the Commodore 64 Collection 2 is so much better than the first one. There are only a couple of games that are complete rubbish, with the majority being pretty okay. Now, I don't think there's anything on here to get too excited about, there's no killer title, but what it does offer is a lot of unique experiences and good variety. For the most part, it's well curated, and while you're not going to be blown away by it, I think most people will find something to enjoy in this one, not just Commodore 64 fans. For those reasons, I'm going to score this one a respectable 6 out of 10. As always, thanks so much for watching, and I really hope you've enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think of this collection in the comments. Please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe for more of my content. Hopefully, I'll catch you next time. Ciao!